welcome to another episode of the SMAGcast, another in our series of what Mike has referred to as Group Solitaire. This week, we'll once again be recording our own little rants or pieces and giving them to you as a group project. So, without further ado, let's see who's up first.
Okay, this is Calypso/Warren. This is my solitaire portion of the bi-weekly podcast known as the SMAGcast. I have almost nothing interesting to talk about, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk and try to make whatever comes out of my mouth more interesting than silence. And some of you will probably end up thinking, failure, but that's okay. I can deal with that. I recently got a new microphone, which is incredibly boring to know. It is lower quality, but sounds better, has less static, so that's good. It happens to be a rock band mic. I have been working on releasing my 2.0 version of my body mod, CNHF, which is... The idea behind CNHF, which I don't know that I've discussed before on the podcast, is, with the idea is equal degrees of protection and badassery. So, like, all the female armors that have boob cups on them, that immediately direct sword blows towards the sternum, and also... As I understand, if you have boob cups on your armor, if you trip and fall forward, then all the weight of your fall will go straight into your sternum and crush your chest fairly easily because the boob cups aren't touching anything because your boobs are not made of bone. So even if they compress inside the boob cups, the bulk of the force is going to hit your sternum. So, like, all the boob cup armors in the game, I've converted to non-boob armors. Still providing some room for breasts, but for the most part, treating it like if you're a female warrior, you're wearing some kind of medieval-style sports bra, like a chest wrap or something, to keep your boobs from flopping around, which generally flattens your boobs and makes them less of a issue, and therefore, I don't leave 100% of the room for the boobs. I treat it like they've been compressed a bit. The idea behind CNHF is stuff like that, making the armors the same level of safety and same level of coverage. There's a couple armors in the game that are fucked up, like vampire armors from Dawnguard. The male armors cover their entire fucking bodies. The female armors have like big old boob arches where you can, where half the boob is like just hanging out of it. I've recently been teaching somebody how to convert armors, and the first one she converted was the Dawnguard vampire armor that was like that because she hated it with a passion, and I totally understand. In vanilla Skyrim, there is the Forsworn armor. The male Forsworn armor is it's like leather armor with fur, The female Forsworn armor is like a fur bikini with a fur loincloth, and it's not remotely armor at all. So that's next on our list. The Elven armor has big old boob cups. That's like one of the first ones I converted. I had to remesh the entire chest to get rid of those boob cups. But that's okay because they look good now. And they won't crush your sternum. Not that, obviously in game, all this stuff is sort of irrelevant. But from I am a woman and I am looking at myself represented in the game. Why does the guy get safe armor and I get sexy armor? Or why does, the guy get safe armor and I get ridiculous boob cups that aren't even really sexy? They're actually just kind of dumb looking. Who gives a crap about metal boobs? Some people do, actually. So that's actually kind of I have definitely seen some conversions for other body mods where the boobs were like on the steel armor, they have boob cubs too. And people like increase the resolution of the boob cups a lot and then shape them exactly like naked breasts, which you're like, I'm pretty sure that's not, there's like no fucking point to that. But I guess they just need to know. It's like their brain can't connect that there are boobs underneath this unless there are perfect sculptures of boobs on top. And I could even blame Bethesda, in that regard, since they put boobs on the armors in the fucking first place. Although, to be fair, some 12-year-old, like when I did my first conversion, I converted the elven armor and got rid of the boobs. I posted a screenshot of one of my female characters wearing the female elven without the boobs. And the first comment I got was, gay. And I was like, wait, do you think this is a dude? Do you think this is like an extremely effeminate looking guy that I have like some anime, super effeminate character? So that guy had no idea, I guess he was that dumb. All the features were female, and the hips were female, and, things that can't be covered up, things that can't be wrapped down were obviously marking that this is a female character. But then because it didn't have boobs, that guy was like, gay. And you're like, what the fuck? I guess people are that stupid. But I don't think gaming has to market to the lowest common denominator. I know that it does frequently, but I don't think that it has to. And I know there are game companies that don't think that it has to either. And I know across the board, Bethesda did a pretty good job. It's just there's some isolated areas where they did fuck up, where they did do sexist shit. And the idea behind CNHF is just to go in there and, fix those errors. Make the armors for the women just as badass and just as safe as the males. The body itself, I'm about to release 2.0, which is going to have slightly more realistic proportions than 1.0 had. It's going to have more gravitationally affected breasts than 1.0 had. And it's going to work with the UNP texture set. So if there is a UNP texture set that you like and you want to use, you will totally be able to do that, because the UV map, which is what determines how textures fit on a 3D model, is fitted to UNP. So if there's an extra hairy texture, or if there's a scarred up texture, or if there's a muscular texture that's already been made for UNP that you want to be using, you can use it. No problem. So we're pretty happy about that, although I think I'll probably end up using the CNHF textures that Nuska provides, because they just feel more three-dimensional. I don't know what that's about. The cool thing about CNHF also is that at 100 weight, any muscle textures you use actually have corresponding three-dimensional muscles, but they're not weight training muscles. They're not people who cut and make sure they have 0.5% body weight muscles. They're somebody who, is a real person that doesn't really give a fuck about what they look like, but happens to go out and, slay dragons and shit and carry big ass two-handed swords around. So, there's some fat and there's some muscle. It's not fetishized. It's not like, look at this big booty and these, big old boobs. The first one that I've made, the first 100 weight version I made, has the same size breasts as the 0 weight, because I know a lot of users were disappointed that the boobs got bigger at the same time as the muscles. So, because, that doesn't actually happen. Muscles and boobs don't correlate. They actually correlate inversely. depending on fat content or, general fat. Anyway, later I will make I think later I'm going to make a larger boob version of both weights and let people just kind of mix and match. If they want, the small version to have bigger boobs and the large version to have smaller boobs. If they want the small version to have smaller boobs and the bigger version to have bigger boobs, or if they want both to have big boobs and they want both to have small boobs, and, they'll be able to mix and match, do whatever they want. It looks like I have just hit the 10-minute mark, and I've managed to talk about boobs for the bulk of this podcast. You can visit my Tumblr at calyps-smexus.tumblr.com. That's calyps-smexus.tumblr.com. Thank you very much. So, huzzah, and on to the next person.
What's up, guys? This is Mike here. And if you've listened to any of our podcasts before, you may have picked up that I work as a security guard. And last weekend, my schedule changed. So now it's literally my day job, no longer working nights and weekends. I'm working, Monday through Friday, daytime hours. Great, and I finally have weekends off. But there was one thing I wasn't quite ready for. Is that when you work nights and weekends, doing security work, it's pretty boring. I mean, you think a lot of stuff would happen at night, crime and stuff happens there. But in my 3 years of doing it, I've only chased off skateboarders. That's the highlight of my job experience so far. So when this week I started working daylight hours, it was a bit of a surprise at how busy it can be. Monday was Memorial Day, so nothing really happened there. It was a slow day. But Tuesday, the first real full day of people being there, I had an interesting experience. So, let me set the scene here. My console I sit at has a computer and a video monitor for the security camera feeds. Directly behind me is a large column, and this is in the direct center of a large room. It's the first floor of a large structure, kind of like a small mall or something like that. And behind the column against the wall is a couple of rows of benches. To my left and right are different stores of various kinds. There's further down, there's an entrance to a restroom. There's a jewelry store and a beauty salon, a gym. Well, anyway, enough of that description. So I'm sitting there. About midday, I notice a fairly oddly dressed individual. He's an older gentleman, probably late 50s, early 60s, graying hair, or mostly all gray hair. Wearing a red, local business t-shirt, but his pants are what really makes him stand out. He's wearing, these baggy jeans, kind of like Jenkos or something from the, late 90s, but down the sides are this embroidery or something of this, kind of tribal-looking dragons or something. Very, very not in what you'd expect to see a man of his age wearing. So he stands out immediately in that regard. But he also, when he comes in, he sits down on the bench directly behind me where, he's obscured by the column. So, when you have, especially, doing security work, when I can't see an individual who's, hanging out in the area, I get a bit suspicious. So I keep my eye on him, several times I get up from the console, and walk around. There was an event going on outside, a civil rights dedication, so several times I got up and watched that outside, because they had people speaking, stuff like that, and, just keep my eye on him. He's there for a good 20 minutes to a half an hour, just sitting there, talking on his phone, but as I'm sitting at the console, I notice another individual that kind of stands out because I'd seen him walk past a few times. It's Vin Diesel. Okay, it's not actually Vin Diesel. He just looks almost exactly like a, earlier Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel in the last, 5 or 10 years has really bulked up, but he looked like Vin Diesel from back in, Pitch Black. More streamlined, I guess you could say. But, same, darker complexion, bald head. But I notice he walks into the beauty salon. Just kind of weird for a guy with no hair, but maybe he really likes an expensive shave job or something. But no. And then after a while, he comes up to the console. And the gentleman that was sitting behind me, I don't really have a name for him, but we'll just call him the older gentleman, has gotten up from the bench and has now gone into the jewelry store and has been talking to the guys in the jewelry store for at least 5 minutes by this point. So Vin Diesel comes up to the console and he's like, "Hey man, I don't want you to call the cops on me because I'm a cop. And I don't want you to think I'm casing the joint. But see that guy in the red shirt? I'm following him." And he asked me, where the restrooms are, and I tell him. He's like, "Okay, well, could you do me a favor? And I'm going to go to the restroom. If he comes out, will you tell me which way he goes?" Like, "Sure, okay." So Vin Diesel goes to the restroom. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, should I really just believe that this guy told me he was a cop? I mean, on reflection, I was starting to think, if he wants to know anything more than, or wants anything more from me than what he's just asked, I'm going to need to see some identification. So a few minutes later, the older gentleman is still in the jewelry store. Vin Diesel comes back. And the first thing he does, he's just like, he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a very flat, very wide wallet, and flips it while he's watching the guy in the jewelry store to make sure he doesn't come out. Flips it open. It's a well-worn bifold wallet. Like I said, it's really thin, not like it has a bunch of cash in it, but opens it up. It's got 2 clear panels inside, and it's FBI identification papers. I'm a little flabbergasted at this point that, he said he was a cop. He didn't say he was a Fed. But I don't take a too close look, but it looked well worn. It passed the cursory sniff test. So I was like willing to help this guy out. So he's like, "Do you mind if I, stand here and keep an eye on him?" I'm like, "Sure, no problem." So we keep an eye on him. I'll be honest, most of the time I'm at this job, I'm playing on my phone, not really playing, I don't play games, but reading like forums and stuff like that. But once all this started going down, of course, I'm keeping an eye on the cameras, trying to, not look like I'm watching this guy, even though he's in there for a good 15 minutes just talking to the jewelers. Vin Diesel, which actually his name is Brian, he told me. I could have looked on his ID, but once I saw FBI, my brain kind of froze up and said, "The fuck?" But anyway, he's sitting there flipping through a paper, and the older gentleman comes out of the jewelry store and starts to walk away from the desk. And so we're watching him. I'm guessing Brian, Vin Diesel, is waiting for him to get far enough away before he tails him. But before he gets more than, a few paces away, he stops for some reason. The older gentleman turns around, and starts coming back towards the console. And up until this point, I'd still kind of had my doubts about the federal agent, thinking, this is a little too, even though his, ID looked well worn, didn't look like something that was, printed off on an inkjet printer or anything like that. I still was hesitant. But as soon as the older gentleman came within earshot, without missing a beat, the federal agent starts talking to me about the security cameras, playing like he had been doing security upgrades on it, asking me about the cameras, how they were working, was the new system, doing well. I mean, not even missing a beat. So that pretty much cemented his authenticity in my mind, that the fact that he does undercover for a living. But as the older gentleman passed, I wasn't watching him directly. I was looking at the cameras. So, but as the older gentleman passed, once he went out the other doors, Brian, Mr. Diesel, looks at me and says, "That, my friend, is what you call getting burned." Because apparently the older gentleman looked him right in the face when he passed. And he said he was going to have to sit the rest of the day in the car. And that, my friends, has been the most interesting day I've ever had.
Hello, SMAGcast listeners. It's Kevin here, and it's time for my little rant for the week. And I wanted to start off talking about the big geek news that came up on Saturday, which is the end of Matt Smith's tenure as the Doctor. He's decided to leave the show. Steve Moffat's sticking around. After Christmas, or at the Christmas special, he's going to regenerate into the new Doctor. They haven't cast him yet. We don't know who it's going to be. I'm kind of proud of the fandom so far, from the little bits I've seen, because they haven't been saying, "Oh no, the show's over, Matt Smith's leaving." They're okay with it. Now, there are people saying the Doctor can't be old, though, because he has to be young and virile, and I'm like, I think the second and third Doctors would like to have a word with you quietly behind the TARDIS and beat you over the head with their sonic screwdriver. I personally wouldn't mind an older Doctor, someone like, Eccleston's age or older. One of the people that keeps getting brought up is Hugh Laurie. I would love this. Mike brought up an alternative of Stephen Fry last night over dinner with me and Warren. We were all talking about this, and we sort of went a little crazy with our thoughts and suggestions. Some of the other suggestions were Peter Dinklage, The Rock, which we thought that would be hilarious just for like a one-off thing, him doing the people's eyebrow. And sort of a play on Matt Smith's first episode where he was doing the whole, feed me and kept throwing stuff out. The Rock would just be, "No, it's fine, I just need more of it." And the other suggestion I thought of was Peter Dinklage. And Warren thought that would be a great idea. And it probably would, except he's kind of locked into Game of Thrones. Another suggestion that's been brought up, we got to toying around with the idea. Mike was like, "Oh, who do I know that's British that could be the Doctor?" And the first person he thought of was Jeremy Clarkson or James May from Top Gear. And I don't really agree with those, but I thought Richard Hammond would be hilarious. Just him running around a sparking TARDIS console yelling, "That's not gone well!" And possibly having to deal with a Stig. I don't know. It's just a thought. But Doctor Who fandom is strange these days. Everyone was really tired of Russell T Davies, and when we found out Steve Moffat was going to be taking over, everybody jumped on this huge bandwagon about, "Oh no, Russell T Davies was terrible. Now we're going to get great Doctor Who because Steve Moffat wrote like the most popular episodes of Russell T Davies' run, like Blink and Silence, the whole library thing," and everyone was excited about it. But then he took over, and then everyone started yelling, "Oh no, they need to bring Russell T Davies back, because Steve Moffat's ruined it, and David Tennant needs to come back." And I'm like, yeah, because that's really going to happen. Seriously, when has the Doctor ever regenerated into a previous version of himself? You tell me that. Secondly, and this is the other thing, Russell T Davies will not be coming back. I'm sure he's busy doing something fun, and his time on Doctor Who is done, and he's like, "Okay, I'm out, peace, I'm out, whatever." Steve Moffat will be sticking around for as long as the BBC will let him. Me personally, I think an interesting person to take over would be Mark Gatiss. I want you to think about this. Mark Gatiss has written some fantastic episodes of Doctor Who. He wrote the Ice Warrior episode. He's always tried to be reverential, respectful toward the canon of Doctor Who. He's written some very good episodes. He's a good actor, a good writer, and I think he would make a good showrunner for the series. So, think about that for a minute while you're at it. Another idea we had about a regenerated Doctor, there's been talk of the Doctor being black, which is great, especially if they get Idris Elba. Or what was the name? I don't know the guy's name. He played that, the crazy guy with a sword in Serenity. He'd be cool. The other thing we were talking about is the whole idea that the Doctor would regenerate into a woman. Which, maybe it's time for that. We only had really one suggestion for that, and the guy, Mike and Warren, and I'll explain why after this, suggested Emma Watson. Okay, sure, why not? Now, the reason they brought Emma Watson is because we said, why not make the Doctor Ginger finally? And we were like, well, who could play him Ginger? I said, Weasley. Ron Weasley. Think about it. And I think that's when they said, no, Emma Watson. I was like, okay, whatever. Either way, I think it would be funny if they got a Harry Potter person. Because there's been a lot of, Harry Potter people on Doctor Who. I mean, wasn't the Weasley's dad Rory's dad? The groundskeeper at Hogwarts is playing the first Doctor in the big Adventures in Time and Space TV movie about the making of Doctor Who. And, well, of course, David Tennant. So, yeah, there's some room to play around with the whole Harry Potter cast. Heck, why not Radcliffe? Daniel Radcliffe. That would be kind of interesting. Someone suggested online that the Doctor be American. Well, they've thought about that. They thought about casting an American. They've approached American actors, and all the American actors have said, I don't think you want to do this. And I understand that. They should be nervous. Think about it. This is the British show. You talk to Americans about British television, they know, like, Upstairs, Downstairs, Are You Being Served, Monty Python, and Doctor Who. And Benny Hill. And that's it. Doctor Who is like one of those. It's a cultural icon. It means England to some people, and you might not want to cast an American. It would be interesting to have more Americans on the show, but, I'm not going to say I'm going to stop watching unless they start having Americans on there. That would be foolishness. So I'm sort of curious to hear what everyone else out there has to think about this Matt Smith leaving deal. So if you have any thoughts, you can email us at smagcast@gmail.com or comment on our site or on our YouTube videos and let us know what you think about Matt Smith leaving and who you think would make a good Doctor. Because, quite frankly, I'm all out of ideas, and I'm sure everyone else is. Now the only question is, what is the Sci-Fi Channel going to do with Blake 7? Well, that's it for me. Off to the next person, and I will see you guys next week in the roundtable discussion. Later.
Hello, SMAGcast. It's Paul back again. Sorry for the delay. I was out of town this weekend, so we couldn't actually do the little one-off things like we usually do. Well, I couldn't until now. Anyway, I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about, namely Dragon Con. Now, I go to Dragon Con every year. Well, okay, I say every year, but it really depends on whether or not there is a hurricane. Last year I wasn't able to go because of Hurricane Isaac. Now, some of you little Smag people or Smagites or whatever we should call you people, I'm not really sure what we should call you. I mean, the fans really need to have a name, I think. Could call you something like Smaggies. That doesn't really sound all that great, frankly. Smaggy. I'm a Smaggy. No. Smagpies. Okay, there we go. That's it. From now on, anybody that listens to this show is my little Smagpie. So, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, Dragon Con. So, I work in emergency management, and a couple of times during the Dragon Con festivities, there's been a hurricane coming through the state of Mississippi, which is where we all live. Well, not all of us. I don't know where you live. You're a Smagpie. You could be anywhere. Probably flew south for the summer. Anyway, but like Kevin and Mike and Warren and I all live in Mississippi. And yeah, I work for disaster management. And the first year I started working there, I went to Dragon Con, which is in Atlanta. It's Labor Day weekend. It's been summed up by a friend of mine who goes as the greatest 4-day all-nighter you'll ever have. And I'd say that's pretty much true. It starts on a Thursday. We usually get up and hit the road about 6 a.m., get out to Atlanta, which is where it's held, sometime in the early afternoon, go in, put our bags down, flip over some of the furniture, have a drink, go downstairs and start the registration process. Because you can have tickets, you can buy your tickets ahead of time, and the further out you buy them, the cheaper they are, starting at like $70, and up to the day of the event, they end up at $125, I believe. So when you pre-reg, which is buy your tickets ahead of time, you have to stand in line for 3 to 4 hours just to get your badge. Now, the last time I went, 2 years ago, I didn't pre-reg. I said, you know what, screw it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go. There might be a hurricane. I'm just going to pay there. Yeah. With cash, $225. 5 minutes in line. So from now on, I know what I'm doing. But it's a wonderful event. It's all fan run. Now, if you've ever thought about going to, like, say, one of the Comic Cons in Portland or San Diego or even New Orleans, those are industry driven, and they start at like 8 o'clock in the morning and they go till 5:30, and then once 5:30 hits, the con is over for the day. Dragon Con's 24 hours. There is always something going on. I tend to fall asleep around 2 a.m. and the party is still just completely rocking. It's just me and 50,000 of my closest friends in 5 hotels in downtown Atlanta. I've got a couple of stories from that time, a couple of times that I've gone. One time I was standing outside between, I think, the Hilton or the Hyatt or one of the things, and this guy comes up and he's smoking a cigarette, and he's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" I was like, "Hey, it's going pretty well actually. How are you doing?" And we got to chatting and stuff, and once he finished his cigarette, he was like, "Yeah, okay, so, alright, I gotta go help Trace Blue out with his panel." I was like, "Trace Blue? Oh yeah." I'm thinking, yeah, that's Dr. Forrester from Mystery Science Theater 3000. Recognize that name. And I looked down at the guy's badge, and I was like, J. Elvis Weinstein. God, that sounds familiar. Where did I know him from? So I'm walking back through the hotel, and I was like, J. Elvis Weinstein, J. Elvis Weinstein. I can't remember where I place him. What does he do? Got on my phone, looked it up. I was like, holy crap, that was the voice of Tom Servo. I had just been talking to Tom Servo, and I thought that was just absolutely awesome that, one, I got to talk to him, but two, he just walks up and says hello, and we have a 5-minute conversation. So the next day, I go to the Hall of Heroes, which is where a lot of the celebrities sit behind tables and take money in exchange for pictures of themselves. And I walked up to the table with J. Elvis Weinstein, and Trace Blue was there, and I was dressed as the 10th Doctor from Doctor Who, David Tennant. And Weinstein remembers me. He's like, "Hey man, how's it going? Yeah, I remember you from yesterday." I'm like, "Hey, J. Elvis, what's going on, man?" Trace Blue's there. He's like, "Hey, that's a pretty snappy suit you got on there." And I explained to him, which character I was cosplaying as, and pulled out my sonic screwdriver, and he played with it for a minute, and pulled out the psychic paper, which actually belongs to Kevin, but Mike had written on there at one point in time, "Kevin poops." And I pointed this out to Trace Blue, Dr. Forrester. As soon as I got done talking to them, and they're great guys and stuff, I texted Kevin, and told him that I told Dr. Forrester that he poops. And he, of course, sends me a text message back calling me a bastard or something along those lines, and I had to remind him that, Kevin, it's okay. Everybody poops. So I think the following year I met the guy who plays Shepard Book on Firefly and Serenity. And I had seen him in an interview where he said that a lot of people think he's Tim Reed from WKRP in Cincinnati, but he's not. And while I thought about bringing that up, I didn't. I just kind of walked up to him and said hello, and he says, hello. And I said, I just wanted to tell you hello. And he says, okay. It's like, well, hello. He goes, hello. And then there's a pause. I said, well, okay, that's about it. He goes, all right then. See you later. I said, all right, thank you. And walked off. Now, one year, that's like, I think 4 years ago, Felicia Day, who, I don't know if you know who she is. She's a little cute redhead girl, woman thing, person. I don't know. She does some stuff online. She did Dr. Horrible sing-along blog, if you've seen it, or The Guild. And really cute. I have a thing for redheads. And I'm walking around the con, and I say to a friend of mine, man, I'd really like to see Felicia Day this year. And about that time, she walks past me. And I was like, oh, well, there you go. There's Felicia Day. So later on, I think the next evening, we're waiting to get on an elevator in the Marriott, which is about a 30-minute wait, give or take. And I'm looking at another friend. I was like, well, I'd still really like to see Felicia Day. And then the elevator's doors open, and out walks Felicia Day. So later that night, I'm up in the room, and I look at a friend of mine, and I said, I'd really like to see Felicia Day. And I looked around, but no, sadly, she did not materialize in the room. What can you do? It was worth a try. But, so last year, Hurricane Isaac came through, and my boss, who is a meteorologist, said, no, Hurricane Isaac, it's going to come up towards us, and it's going to cut a hard right and go across the panhandle of Florida, dissipate over the dangly bit of Florida, and just become a tropical depression. And I said, no, it's going to hit us. Said, no, I mean, all the models have it going to the right. There's one model that says it's going to go into Texas, but that's just kind of like a non-whatever model, whatnot. And I was like, nope, it's going to hit us because I'm going to Dragon Con, and the first year I started working here, I had to come back early because of Hurricane Gustav. It's like, it'll never happen. Yeah, so anyway, Hurricane Isaac came straight up and hit Mississippi. So every year, whenever my friends start talking about Dragon Con, they're like, are you excited? And I tell them, no, I'm not excited. I'll be excited a week beforehand when I'm sure we're not going to get hit by a hurricane. And that's basically Dragon Con in a nutshell, although I didn't really tell you anything about it. I just told you stories. It's a sci-fi gaming convention, like I said, run by, the fans. There's a lot of celebrities there, Star Trek captains, things of that nature. There's art. Well, some of it's not really art, but whatever. The dealer rooms, those are always nice if you want to pick something up. What else is there? There's tracts, which are people talk about things and people sit there and listen like you do. Room parties, bigger parties. There's a parade every Saturday morning. Every Saturday morning of Dragon Con. But, it's just tens of thousands of people in costume. Everybody's having a wonderful time. There's a lot of alcohol involved, of course. But yeah, it's a wonderful time. If you ever get a chance to go, I highly recommend it. So I guess that's about it. I hit my 10-minute mark. So all you lovely little smag pies and whatnot, I will see all of you guys next time.
Well, that is it, and I hope everyone has enjoyed this week's round of Group Solitaire. Next week we'll be back with our regular roundtable discussion, so tune in and listen. Remember, you can find us on our website or iTunes, so I will see you guys next week. Stay safe, and I don't know, stay smaggy or something. Good night, everybody. This has been the SMAGcast. If you have any thoughts or questions, you can reach us at thesmagcast@gmail.com. Our theme music is Out of School by Jazar from the album Traveler's Guide, available from freemusicarchive.org and used under Creative Commons license.